So welcome and thank you for joining us tonight. I am Reverend Rob, and I serve as an associate minister at the Imani Community Church in Oakland, where we profess a faith to change the world. Our social justice ministry's focus on voter engagement is one of the ways that we put that faith into action, and we are beyond happy that you've taken time to join us this evening. We have two co-sponsors for tonight's event. First, the National Coalition of 100 Black Women Incorporated Oakland chapter, which is an advocacy organization that advances leadership development and gender equity for Black women and girls. The other co-sponsor is the Alpha Nu Omega chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, which is an international organization with over 900 chapters of college-educated women serving the community, particularly Black women and girls. We're thankful for their partnership in presenting this evening's voter education session. Now, many of us only think about elections every 4 years when the country votes for president. The folks running for office in those off years have it easily because nobody's really paying attention. And as important and impactful as the people who fill elected offices are, the proposed laws and budget amendments and tax proposals and bond measures and propositions are at least as important and impactful, if not more so. The decisions about state propositions and local ballot measures impact us directly, immediately, and profoundly. We need to be well informed about the people who want our votes and the measures that got enough signatures from residents or enough support from lawmakers to get on the ballot for the public to make the final decision. Tonight, we're going to focus on the pros and cons of the statewide and City of Oakland ballot initiatives that you'll see on your ballots, which hopefully will arrive in your mailbox this week. For the second time this year, we're blessed to have as our presenter Anna Mathai, Vice President and Co-Chair of Voter Services at the League of Women Voters of Oakland. Anna retired from a career in physics and technology in 2018. She believes that democracy only works when citizens are engaged in the process, and she wants to empower voters to fight disinformation. Anna's with the education group of the Oakland League. Separately, the state and local leagues do research on ballot initiatives and have taken positions on most of them. So if you want to know about what the league's endorsements are, put your email in the chat and we'll send you a copy of their positions. As a matter of courtesy, please keep your microphones muted. We are recording tonight's session and it will be available on YouTube for the broader community to access. You'll also be able to find a link to the recording on our website, www.imanicc.org. Please use the chat to submit your questions, and I will be doing my best to get everything into a moderated Q&A with Anna after she discusses the 10 statewide propositions. Then the folks who are not registered to vote in Oakland can log off if you want to, or stay if you want to get the information to share with your people who do live in Oakland. And then Anna will go over the 3 Oakland ballot measures, and then we'll have another Q&A at the end. That good? I see nobody stressing out in the chat. All right. So get your voter guides, your sample ballot, whatever you have, get your stuff together, and let us hear from Anna Mathai. Anna.
Great. Thanks so much, Reverend Rob. I am just going to share my screen here. Super. Again, thanks so much. It is a pleasure to be back. Again, my name is Anna, and thank you for inviting the League to make this presentation on the November ballot measures. As Reverend Rob said, the League of Women Voters is a grassroots, nonpartisan organization of women and men. And nonpartisan means we never support or oppose political parties or candidates. But I am representing the Voter Services and Education branch of the League today. So we have a number of measures that we will be voting on. So here's some tips on how to evaluate these measures. So get a sense of what the measure does and why. What would it cost? How will it be paid for? Do you think it's well written, or is it likely to cause more problems than it solves? And we have seen that a number of times. Follow the money. Who's really behind it? And then hopefully you will be able to come to a conclusion as to which side do you agree with. Do you support or do you oppose, and you vote accordingly. Voting is not a test, so it is fine to leave blanks. Vote for what is clear and important to you. Most importantly, if you're not sure about some measure, leave that blank, but don't not vote on everything else because you didn't understand one or two measures. So, joy or joy, we have 10 California ballot propositions and 3 for the state of Oakland. So let's start with the California ones. So a state ballot proposition can make a law, it can change existing laws, or it can change the California Constitution. And a proposition passes and becomes law if it receives more than 50% of the yes votes. Propositions get on the ballot in 2 ways. The state lawmakers can put them there, and they put them there with a 2/3 vote. And those are all the single-digit ones that you see, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. The second way propositions get on the ballot is through an initiative. And an initiative is a change that's proposed by citizens or special interest groups who have collected enough voter signatures to get on the ballot. And those are all the double-digit ones that you see, 32 all the way through 36. So we are going to go slightly out of order. We're going to talk about the first 3 measures that are bond related. So let's first talk about what a bond is. So just like you think of a mortgage for a house, I mean, when you want to buy a house, you get a mortgage, and then, that's the money up front to buy the house, and then you pay it down over years. Bond is similar. So to get more money for projects such as building schools, bridges, so on and so forth, governments borrow money and they sell long-term bonds to investors, and governments repay the investors with interest over 30 to 40 years. And bonds are paid back from the general fund. That's the money that California gets every year from taxes or fees. So let's start with the first of the bonds. This is Prop 2. So Prop 2 is a schools bond. So a little background here. California has about 10,000 public schools and about 115 community colleges. The state and local districts share the cost of repairing and upgrading these schools and building new ones. Both the state and local school districts cover their share of costs by issuing bonds. So over time, you'll see approvals for state districts and local districts to take on more bond debt to do things around schools or other measures. So Prop 2 is asking that you allow California to issue $10 billion in bonds. And if it passes, this money obtained by selling these bonds will be distributed as matching funds to local districts who apply for grants. So right now, nearly 40% of students attend schools that do not meet minimum facility standards, and 15% attend schools with extreme deficiencies such as water damage, power failures, structural damage. I think we've heard our own stories about lead in the water in Oakland schools, so that's one of the things that needs remediation at the local level. A little bit more background, the last school measure or the school facilities bond was approved in 2016 for $9 billion, so all that money has been committed. A 2020 bond measure narrowly failed, which was really the first time a school bond measure failed to pass, probably related to COVID. And so now this bond measure is back, and it's seeking to borrow $8.5 billion for public schools and $1.5 billion for community colleges. So what does this mean in terms of fiscal effects? Again, just like we pay back a mortgage and it affects your budget because you're paying back the interest. Similarly, you have increased state expenses. We'll be paying it back if this bond measure passes at $5 million a year for a period of 35 years. This is what we call our money slide. This kind of helps you get a sense of who's funding the measure and who's against it. About $5 million in support. So let me just give you a little time to just look through the players so you get a sense of who's who in this landscape. So supporters say that it is crucial to fund basic school repairs to meet the safety standards and to support students. They point out that funds are approved only with local district and community input, and this measure has special support for small districts and those with disadvantaged communities. Opponents don't argue that school facility upgrades are needed, but they say this should be funded out of the general fund. They point out that California has about 109 billion in outstanding and unused bonds. And so they make the claim that we really need to prioritize educational funding over other expenditures. So just to recap, if you vote yes, you are approving a $10 billion bond to fix school facilities. And if you vote no, you do not approve this bond. The second of our bond measures is around water and climate. So this is again a bond measure, again $10 billion. So this seeks voter approval to take on bond debt, to spend money on improving the water supply and water quality, as well as storm management systems and water restoration. So lots of things around improving drinking water for millions of Californians. The money would also fund wildfire prevention and responses to sea level rise and mitigation of other environmental problems associated with climate change. So on the right, you can see the breakdown. You've got 3.8 billion for water out of this 10 billion bond. You've got my screen is in the way. You have 1.5 billion for 1.5 billion for wildfires, and then the other breaks into 1.2 for coastal resilience, 1.2 for biodiversity, 2.5 for clean air parks, heat mitigation, and agriculture. In this bond, 40% of the funding will be allocated to low-income communities or those most impacted by environmental disasters or climate change. And some of the money will replace funds that were cut from the budget recently due to the current deficit. So fiscal effects, again, just like you pay back a mortgage over time, the interest is going to be about $400 million a year, again paid out of the state's general fund. However, keep in mind that the bonds would fund projects that could reduce future risk and cost of damage from disasters. So there may be some savings there. Again, we have our money slide with about 3.4 million for the measure, none against it, and I'll give you a few seconds to look over the players. I should have mentioned earlier, if you see $3 signs, that's more than $1 million that, for example, the Nature Conservancy has put towards this measure. $2 signs is hundreds of thousands. So supporters say that the threat from climate change is urgent and it's growing, so we really need to act now to make us more resilient. And this measure would help make efficient and sensible investments in proven solutions. So opponents, they absolutely agree that clean drinking water and wildfire prevention is necessary, but they are asking that this should be funded from the state budget. And they also say that this is funding unproven technologies with little evidence of success. So again, if you vote yes, you are supporting $10 billion for projects to reduce climate impacts. And if you're voting no, you do not support this bond. Our next proposition, again, we're going out of order just for this one also because it's kind of bond adjacent, bond related. So this is not a specific bond, but this has to do with the approval, the threshold of approval for local bonds to pass. So unlike statewide bonds, local bonds that's passed by Oakland or Alameda County currently require a 2/3 majority or 67% majority to pass. Local bonds are repaid from property taxes. And what this proposition would do is to lower the voting threshold from 2/3 down to 55%. Local bonds can fund affordable housing for low and middle class. It can pay for infrastructure such as roads, water, fire protection. In terms of effect on the budget, it's likely to have little or no effect on the state budget, but it could increase local borrowing, for example, to increase local housing or infrastructure improvements. If we look at the money slide, again, you see some amount of money for 5 million and a more significant amount against, and I'm going to leave you to look at the players. So supporters say this would give local voters more autonomy to address local needs, and this would help build more housing that's badly needed. Opponents say this is pushing infrastructure costs onto local governments, which increases local debt. And they point out that we already have a very high cost of living, and Prop 5 would make everything more expensive. So what your vote means, again, a yes vote, you are decreasing the voting requirement to 55% for local bond measures. And if you vote no, you want to keep the vote threshold the same, which is at 67%. So those were our three kind of bond adjacent ones, and now we're going to progress in order. So we're going to go back to Prop 3, and this has to do with marriage equality. So what's the background here? Prop 8 in 2008 added language to the California Constitution that says marriage is between a man and a woman. Marriage is only between a man and a woman. Prop 8 was overturned by a federal court. It was ruled unconstitutional under the 14th Amendment. So same-sex marriage has been allowed in California for more than 10 years. And then in 2015, the US Supreme Court allowed same-sex marriage throughout the US. So why do we need this measure? If this proposition passes, it does not change who can marry, but it repeals Prop 8 and it amends the California Constitution to include the right to marry as a fundamental right, which would protect from potential changes in the US courts and rulings that say something different. So again, in terms of the money slide, about 4 million for, none against, and I'll give you a couple of seconds to look through this. So supporters say this is protecting against future attempts to restrict marriage rights for same-sex or interracial couples, and it would align the state constitution with current law and reaffirm the freedom to marry as a fundamental right. Opponents say, as same-sex marriage is already legal, this amendment is fixing a non-existent problem, and they claim that this eliminates all rules for marriage, opening the door to child marriage, incest, and polygamy. So what your vote means, again, if you are voting yes, you are voting for the California Constitution to explicitly include the right to marry. And if you are voting no, the California Constitution, there's going to be no change, it stays as is. We have one more single-digit prop, and that is Prop 6, and this has to do with forced labor in prisons. So the California Constitution bans forced labor except as a punishment for crime. People in California prisons are required to work for minimal pay, under $1 an hour. This proposition would ban forced labor as a punishment for crime. So it would protect people in prison from being disciplined for refusing a work assignment, but the proposition would allow voluntary work and credits or privileges for that work. For example, working could benefit those who are in prison to potentially reduce sentences. It could also change the current reimbursement for work from under $1 to the minimum wage. But this proposition does not mandate that the Department of Corrections pay a minimum wage. Again, that is not mandated in this proposition. So in terms of fiscal effects, any potential increase or decrease in state and local criminal justice costs would likely not exceed tens of millions, so pretty small numbers in the scheme of sort of California's budget. If you look at the dollars for and against, again, a smaller amount of money, but I will leave you to take a look at who's for and against it. So supporters say, it's important to restore human dignity by ending forced labor, which is essentially a modern day version of slavery. They point out that this supports rehabilitation by allowing people in prison to choose their work assignments, so hopefully pick up sort of new job skills. And so this would improve public safety when people in prison leave and rejoin the world outside. There are no arguments submitted against Prop 6. However, opponents argue that people in prison should not dictate what chores they're willing to do while behind bars. So a yes vote, you support banning forced labor in prison, and a no vote, you support keeping the current exceptions to forced labor. So now we're going to move into the first of our initiatives. So these 5 that we just covered were put on the ballot by the California legislature. And now we're going to move into the initiatives that were put on by voter groups or basically by collecting signatures. So it's even more important to look at the motivations of the people who have paid the money to sort of put this on the ballot. So let's start with the first one, which is Prop 32, which raises the minimum wage. This ballot measure was originally, they had planned to put this on the ballot in 2022, but they missed the deadline, so it is on now. The state minimum wage is $16. However, in the past couple of years, actually this year in particular, some workers have a higher minimum wage. Fast food workers in California have a minimum wage of $20, and healthcare workers, it's kind of a sliding scale up to $25. Oakland also has its higher minimum wage, which is $16.50. That's the floor, and certain groups of hotel workers have a higher wage than that. So what this measure would do is it would raise the minimum wage to $18 for businesses who have 26 or more employees. For smaller employees, for employers with 25 or fewer employees, it would raise the minimum wage to $17 in 2025 and then $18 in 2026. So it gives them a little bit more time to come up to that level. And then after that, cost of living adjustments would start in 2027. So the fiscal effects are kind of mixed. The Legislative Analyst Office estimates that the proposition would increase state and local government costs in some ways because you are paying more for both employees and contractors. But they also estimate that there would be savings from lower enrollment in medical and other social programs. So let's again look at the supporters and opponents. Again, a significant amount of money from Joe Sandberg to put this on the ballot. I'll just give you a few minutes here. So supporters say that higher wages can improve the standard of living for millions of workers, and increased consumer spending can help boost the economy. Opponents say that small businesses are more likely to suffer from increased operating costs. They worry that this may result in layoffs of workers or raising prices. And they also point out that there is the potential for reduced business profits, which can lower the taxes collected. So again, to summarize, you want to raise a yes vote means you want to raise the minimum wage in California to $18, and a no vote, you want to keep the minimum wage as it is. Our next proposition is around rent control. Rent control limits how much landlords can raise the rent each year, and many local cities, Oakland, San Francisco, Berkeley, have some form of rent control. However, there is a state law called Costa-Hawkins which limits the ways in which cities can legislate rent control, and it limits it in 3 ways. So one, cities cannot impose rent control on single-family homes. Second, they cannot impose rent control on newer apartments built after 1995. And third, rent control is for current tenants only. If a tenant moves out and a new tenant moves in, the landlord is allowed to raise the rent to market. So the effect of this proposition would be to repeal the state law and move the authority over rent control from the state to the local government. So it would allow the local governments to regulate rent controls for any type of housing, but only if they'd like to. I mean, there is nothing in this measure that says local authorities or local governments have to impose rent control. It would just be up to the local governments to do it or not. The fiscal effect is a little mixed. Chances are no effect on the state budget. The effect on the local budget really depends on what the cities and counties decide to do. If they do impose rent control, the measure would likely reduce some dollars from property taxes, which could be in the tens of millions. And again, if they choose to have rent control, they would probably also need to spend some money to enforce these rent control laws. Let's see who is for and against this. There is a big foundation called the AIDS Healthcare Foundation, and just note that name because it's going to play into the next measure. They have put about $30 million into this measure, and they supported similar measures in 2018 and 2020, both of which failed to pass. Again, I think this is probably the most expensive measure on the ballot this time. We have, $66 million against from the realtors and the apartment association. So supporters say that Prop 33 will allow local governments to protect renters, and they say that local voters and cities should decide if, when, and how to regulate rents rather than the state. The opposition says Prop 33 could increase housing costs and it could block affordable housing from being built, which, if that happened, would worsen the housing crisis. And they also say that Prop 33 could reduce some home values. So a yes vote means you want to remove the current limits on rent control and leave it entirely up to the local government. A no vote is you want to keep the limits on rent control as they are, some with the state, some with local. We come to Prop 34, which is one of the more complicated measures, so just hang in here for a minute. This is around restricting spending of drug profits. So what's the background here? There's a federal law. It's a federal drug discount program which allows healthcare workers that serve low-income people to buy prescription drugs at a discount, sell them at retail prices, and use the profits to expand services. So the AIDS Healthcare Foundation is one of these providers. And if you remember from the money chart on the last measure, which is around rent control, for the third time, the AIDS Healthcare Foundation has used some of its profits to place rent control on the ballot. The California Apartment Association opposes rent control, and so they want to limit the AIDS Foundation's ability to use its profits to bring these kinds of ballot initiatives forward. Little bit more background. Medi-Cal provides healthcare coverage for people with low incomes, and Medi-Cal RX covers prescription drugs. So what this proposition would do is it would make the Medi-Cal RX program into a state law and create new rules that singles out this one foundation, the AIDS Healthcare Foundation, who would have to spend at least 98% of their net revenue on direct patient care. So it would limit their ability to be sponsoring initiatives. So the fiscal effect probably would be some increased state costs to enforce the new rules. And if we look at the dollar slide, we kind of see a flip from Prop 33. This is supported by the California Apartment Association, and the AIDS Healthcare Foundation is opposing it. So what do supporters say? Supporters say that any profits from discount drug programs should be spent on healthcare, and the state could negotiate lower Medi-Cal prescription drug prices if this proposition passed. The opponents say this is an abuse of the initiative process to target one healthcare provider that supports rent control. And they point out that federal law allows profits from drug discounts to support the entire nonprofit mission of a healthcare provider. So you are voting, if you vote yes, you want to restrict the spending of prescription drug revenues. And if you vote no, you don't want to impose new restrictions on the use of prescription drug revenues. Prop 35 is another one which is slightly complicated. So let's walk through this one. So this is around healthcare and a healthcare tax. So California charges healthcare plans a tax, and this is called the Managed Care Organizations Tax. So this is on entities such as Kaiser, Blue Cross, sort of any healthcare organizations that provide managed care, or HMOs. This tax is not permanent. It's periodically reapproved. It will expire in a couple of years until it's renewed. And the federal government matches this MCO tax dollar for dollar. And so that collectively generates about $7 to $8 billion a year, which is used to support Medi-Cal. But lawmakers have used this tax money for other purposes in the state budget. So the effect of this proposition would make the tax permanent, so make this a tax on healthcare permanent, but it would require federal approval. The proposition would earmark the tax money. That is, the tax money could only be spent to increase reimbursement payments for certain kinds of services such as primary and specialty healthcare. So it would prevent the lawmakers from using this tax money for other purposes or replacing existing funding, which is something they have done, especially when California is running a deficit. So what are the fiscal effects? It would increase Medi-Cal funding. However, it would also increase state costs for expanding services under Medi-Cal, especially if we get less federal match dollars. So if we look at who's supporting it, 48 million for, and I'll let you see the players. So supporters say that this would protect and expand access to healthcare for millions of Californians, including children, low-income families, seniors, people with disabilities. There is no organized opposition. However, Governor Newsom and policy experts argue that earmarking, or sort of target earmarking how the tax revenue is spent, that is saying that the tax revenue can only be spent on certain issues, makes it difficult to balance the state budget as a whole. And expanding Medi-Cal services will create additional costs for the state, which they're not sure we can afford. So you are voting, if you vote yes, you want to make the existing tax permanent with new spending restrictions on what the tax can be spent on. And if you vote no, you want to continue things the way they are. We are now down to our last state measure, which is Prop 36 around increasing crime penalties, and maybe one that you're starting to see a lot of ads around. So what's the background here? In 2014, Prop 47 turned non-violent crimes like drug possession and shoplifting into misdemeanors, which is less serious than felonies, unless the person had prior convictions for serious crimes. As a result, the prison population has decreased and money saved has been redirected towards social programs. More recently, we have had an increase in organized retail theft, smash and grab, robberies. I don't think that's a surprise to any of us. So what this proposition would do is to reclassify the theft of items less than $950 from misdemeanors back to felonies if the suspect has 2 or more past convictions for certain theft crimes. So it's rolling back some of the lessening of penalties of Prop 47. It would add fentanyl to the list of hard drugs. That means it would increase penalties for the sale or use of fentanyl. It would create a new class of crime, which is treatment-mandated felonies, which gives the offender the option to participate in drug and mental health treatment. So people who don't contest the charge could complete drug treatment instead of going to prison, but if they don't finish treatment, they would still face up to 3 years in prison. The fiscal effects are a little hard to quantify. State and local criminal justice costs could arise or increase from an increase in prison populations and an increase in the court workload. This prop would also reduce the state savings created by Prop 47 that are currently used for mental health and drug treatment, school programs, and victim services. So let's see our money slide. We have a number of retailers have funded this proposition, and I'll just let you take a look at this. So supporters say that tougher laws against retail theft will protect businesses in every community, and it would reduce crime and substance abuse by mandating treatments for felony drug offenders. Opponents say this would make California less safe by reducing funding for crime prevention, treatment, rehabilitation, and services for crime victims, and it would cost the taxpayers billions of dollars to imprison more people without reducing crime. So a yes vote, you want to increase penalties on some crime, while a no vote, you want to keep the current penalties. Let me just stop sharing. That's all 10 California propositions. Let me just stop sharing and take any questions.
All right, thank you. So we have a few questions on the California measures, and I'll just go in numerical order. So Prop 2 related. So can the bond funds be used for anything other than facility upgrades, like to fill other gaps in local school district budgets? And how do we know if the funds are actually used and what they're used on? And how does it affect the state's tax obligation?
So this is all around infrastructure. So it's all around, any infrastructure that's related to the schools, again, to remediate. It could be new construction. And how this typically works is we actually had, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the name of the bond, but we had a local bond measure in 2020, which was around Oakland schools. The number escapes me right now. But we approved a local bond, and there was a whole list of projects that were done. So typically what happens is the local school district has a list of projects that they want to fund. They have some local money, and they take that list of projects and go to the state and ask for matching funds. So that's how it usually happens. And then in terms of what projects are funded is sort of a collaboration between the two. So it's all around schools and improving infrastructure. Bond money is not used for operating expenses. Maybe that was part of the question.
I think that's right. Thank you. So on Prop 3, are there any laws already on the books that preclude child marriage Is that like a red herring? Is there something that already makes that against the law?
I believe that is a red herring. It I cannot answer if there's explicitly a law on the books, but I believe that is a red herring.
Thank you. Um, Skip Prop 4, that one's clear. Prop 5, do we know how more local bond measures affect local budgets that are often already in the deficit? They take on more bonds.
Yeah, so a bond actually is repaid. It doesn't go against, let me back up. So when a state issues a bond, the payments come out of the general fund. So you have less money in the general fund for other things. When a local bond is approved, it doesn't come out of the local budget, it comes out of our property tax. So anybody who owns property, if you look on the left side of your property tax bill, that's all the things that all the money that's being used to repay bonds. And the right side is various parcel taxes. So no, it would not affect the local budget. It would increase your property taxes.
Hey, uh, so Prop 6, would passage of Prop 6 result in like some incarcerated people working and others not working? Like how practically would that look?
Yeah, so the hope again by the proponents is to incentivize everyone to do work by, offering to reduce sentences, giving more privileges. That's the hope. But it is possible that some would refuse to, and there would be no penalties for them refusing to if the proposition passed.
Let me go back to Diane's question about Prop 3. Have the Federated Indians indicated their special interest in supporting Prop 3?
It's interesting that there's a lot of money. I'm not sure if there's just a lot of mutual back scratching that goes on. So I'm not really sure. Chances are they're putting money into it to get a return at some point. But I'm sorry, I don't explicitly know why.
Cool. Prop 33. Does rent control include Section 8 housing? Or I guess is Section 8 housing included in rent control?
So again, the rent control, so right now, so if we take away Section 8, it's on the types of units. So right now, like for example, in Oakland, there is no rent control for single family homes. There's no rent control for newer units built after 1995. So it's more on the type of housing than on whether it's Section 8 or not.
Okay, cool. Under Prop 6, could the prisons offer inmates higher wages to motivate them, or you think it'd really be more bartering about time served?
It could be either. So there's nothing in the proposition that mandates that inmates are paid minimum wage. So it's up to the Department of Corrections to decide where in the spectrum they want to be.
Jumping back to Prop 33, um, would that rescind Costa-Hawkins and the exclusion of single-family homes being subjected to rent control? Prop 33?
Right. So Prop 33 is all about eliminating Costa-Hawkins. So if
Okay.
Prop 33 passes, Costa-Hawkins is gone. Oakland can decide. I mean, Costa-Hawkins is gone. Oakland can decide what additional rent control they would like to see. It doesn't happen automatically. Oakland would have to pass local laws on what additional rent control they'd like to see.
Okay. Um, Going back to Prop 6, because particularly in fire seasons, we see inmates used to fight fires. Would Prop 6 impact that at all? Or I guess folks could volunteer to fight fires, but you wouldn't have to go fight a fire.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. So again, you could volunteer, and again, that may be a situation where possibly people could possibly volunteer because that's something they would like to do once they leave prison, and they'd get some experience there. But they could make a judgment based on the situation whether they'd like to or not.
Well, but if prisoners don't want to fight fires, would that impact the state's budget for how they spend money to fight fires?
Possibly, but if they
Okay.
are not able to incentivize enough, again, the hope, if they're not able to incentivize enough people in prison, yeah, it could affect things.
Prop 36, would smash and grab robberies, uh, and robberies be affected by the, like, would the kind of lower cost thefts turn into felonies all of a sudden now?
So it would be if somebody had two convictions already and there's a third, they are convicted for a third crime, then that would be prosecuted as a felony. So yes, it would affect. So it's rolling back. It's kind of going back to three
Yeah.
strikes in a way. Yeah. I also want to
Um,
point out, sorry, on that
yeah.
one, I also want to point out that there's been a lot of back and forth on that. So Governor Newsom also passed a series of laws around targeting sort of retail crime gangs, it's retail theft
Mhm.
gangs, if you will. So there's a host of laws that he passed in August. So you might want to sort of Google that or take a look at that and also see how that compares.
And so if they turn more stuff into felonies, are they going to then have to build more jails because they filled them all back up again?
That's the concern. That's the concern, that we're sort of back to square one again. That is the concern.
And just so folks are, Larry Warren comments to me that it's always been volunteer to work as a firefighter if you're an inmate, to fight wildfires.
Ah, thank you. I wasn't quite aware of
So
that.
it's not all the way slavery. Other questions? All right, so those are the 10 statewide propositions. Uh, So for the folks that are going to slide off, the folks that are not registered to vote in Oakland, we're going to do the Oakland ballot measures, but just some important dates to remember. October 21st is the deadline to register to vote by mail in the November 5th election, but you can register in person up to and including Election Day. Be sure to, when you get your ballot, complete your ballot, seal it, sign it, and return it by mail to a drop box or to a vote center. You can also vote in person during the days up to and including November 5th. For more personalized information, go to vote411.org. And if you haven't already put your email in the chat to receive the information on the position that the League of Women Voters is taking on the ballot measures, then go ahead and do that, and we'll make sure we get that to you after this session is over. So now for the Oakland ballot measures.
Yeah, if I can put in just one
Oh,
more plug, if possible, try and send in your ballot a little earlier. We're all concerned about how backed up the registrar of voters is on the last day. So if you have made up your mind, you have an idea, please send it in earlier. I think it just helps everyone all around. Super.
sure.
All right, we are. Let me just pass this back here. All right, hopefully everyone can see this now again. All right, so we are on to,
We can't see your slides yet.
not as yet. Okay, I think I ended up. Let's try this again. My gosh, I'm not sure what I seem to have lost my slides entirely. Okay, where are they?
Well, excuse me while we're waiting. I just had a question, and maybe it's a really simple answer, but what is your definition of child marriages?
I believe that is under the age of 18.
Okay,
For California, it is, yes. So it's different by
okay,
state, right? It's age of consent in marriage is different by state.
okay, thank you.
Reverend Rob, I have a question I'd like you to ask it to
Sure.
in the chat.
Can you go ahead and ask it? Because I don't see it.
Oh, my question was, um, whether or not she had read Alameda County Grand Juries Association's article regarding the wording of ballot questions, which are, they found, inherently biased to favor the proponents of the measures. And my question was, are the ballot measures written by local officials?
So it depends. So I have not read the report, but I've seen an article on it. So the ballot measure, if the measure is put on the ballot by the officials, yes, it's written by officials. If it's an initiative, so if it is put on the ballot by the group that's raised the money or collected the signatures, it's written by them. So the ballot measure is definitely written by people who have an interest in having the measure passed. So I think it would benefit us all to read the whole measure and not rely on the title alone.
And read the grand jury article that looked at each one of the measures and found bias.
I am completely flummoxed here. I am sorry, I'm not quite sure what's happening. Give me just 1 second. What is going on?
No worries. It'll turn up.
Okay.
Everybody, don't forget to put your email address in the chat if you want a copy of the recommendations. And say a prayer for Anna and her slides.
I know, really. I'm not sure if you can see what I'm sharing here.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, you get to see
We see your drive.
Yeah.
All right, coming up.
There you go.
All right, let me just get it. Well, I am glad I don't have a lot of skeletons in my closet here, or at least not ones that showed up immediately. So here we go.
That's funny.
All right, super. So again, ballot measures, just like the state ones, ballot measures can be put on the ballot either by the city council. So there's two measures that are put on by the city council. And the third one is an initiative. So just like a state measure, this is by citizens or groups that wanted to get this on the ballot. So again, I think like someone pointed out, it's important to read beyond just the question, but get to really the intent of the ballot. So the first one is around wildfire prevention. So anyone who's been here since 1991 or just has heard about wildfires in general knows that the Oakland hills require pretty active management of high wildfire risks. And voters have previously voted to fund fire prevention efforts. This year, Oakland developed a 10-year vegetation management plan, kind of a comprehensive management plan to manage these fire risks. And so what this measure is a special tax for 20 years on owners of properties within this wildfire prevention zone. This is really the high fire risk zone as defined by the California Department of Forestry and Fire Prevention. So this tax is to get the money to implement the city's vegetation management plan, which is around dead and dying trees and managing evacuation routes and so on. So this is special in the sense that you will see this on your ballot only if you live within this map area that's highlighted in red. And so this is a little bit hard to see, but there's a bigger map on our website. This down here, if you can see my cursor, is Highway 13. So it's a little bit south of Highway 13. It's a lot north. And then it goes down to where 580 comes off, down to the zoo and around there. So again, if you live within the zone or you own property within the zone, you will see this on your ballot. If you don't, you will not know that this measure exists. So it is basically an annual parcel tax. It's on properties in this zone, $99 for single family dwellings and $65 for each unit in residential properties, with some exemptions for people with low incomes. Oops. Not sure how I managed to do that. All right. So this is the money slide. We don't typically have a lot of money in local measures. So what we do is we list the proponents or the signatories to the measure. So you will have an idea of who within the community is supporting it. And that's what's in bold. These are the signatories. So you will see it in your official voter guide. So supporters say that the most effective way to prevent forest fires is preventative. And so this funding is needed to fund the implementation of Oakland's comprehensive vegetation management plan. Opponents, agree that wildfire prevention is essential, but they really want this to be funded from the city's general fund. And they are also unhappy because they say oversight is inadequate because an audit by the city auditor is optional. So a yes vote means you are supporting a special tax for wildfire prevention, and a no vote means you oppose this special tax. And again, you will see this in your ballot only if you live within this wildfire prevention zone. Measure NN is an initiative. That means it was brought to the ballot by groups of voter signatures. It's around violence prevention, and it requires a 50% majority to pass. I'm sorry, I should have said the previous measure, MM, requires a 2/3 majority. I forgot to say that. So the background here, in 2014, Measure Z, or since 2014, under Measure Z, Oakland has collected both property and parking lot taxes to fund violence prevention and emergency response programs. So that money has gone into, some of that money has gone into the police department, the Department of Violence Prevention, and the fire department. Measure Z collected about $30 million a year, and it will expire at the end of 2024. So what Measure NN would do is it would continue and increase the current parcel and parking lot taxes for 9 more years. And the revenue would be spent on reducing homicides, robberies, carjackings, other violence, improving 911 emergency response rate, and also reducing human trafficking. 60% of this revenue would go to the police, 40% would go to the Department of Violence Prevention, and $3 million off the top would go to the fire department. The Department of Violence Prevention is required to spend 75% of the revenue for providing grants to community-based organizations. In terms of the fiscal effects or the costs, this is again basically comes out as a parcel tax. So single-family units are currently paying about $133 per year. That would jump to $198. Multi-unit residences would jump from about $91 to $132, and parking lot taxes would increase, and this is for commercial parking lots, would increase from 8.5 to 10%. There would be annual increases. There would be some exemptions for seniors, people living in affordable housing projects, people with low incomes. There are some exemptions for that. And the auditor estimates that the first year revenue would be about $47 million. We usually don't have much money for local measures. This seems to be a little bit of an exception. And you can see, again, sort of hundreds of thousands of dollars from SEIU, some of the businesses. And below that in bold, again, you see the signatories. Supporters say that this would enhance public safety by funding critical violence prevention programs, and it would pay for police and firefighters that Oakland needs. It would provide resources to improve the 911 system. Opponents say Measure Z taxes have not prevented violence, so why should the measure be extended? And they are also unhappy that not enough of the Measure NN funds would directly support the hiring of police officers. So you are voting yes, or if you vote yes, you support extending and increasing this parcel tax for 9 more years. And if you vote no, you oppose extending this parcel tax. The last of our measures is around the Public Ethics Commission, and this is Measure 00. This is again put on the ballot by the City Council. So in 1996, Oakland voters approved the Public Ethics Commission, which ensures compliance with Oakland's government ethics, campaign finance, transparency, and lobbyist registration laws. So this is staffed by 7 volunteer commissioners with a small department of city staff, investigators, that they support the commission. In 2014, the Ethics Commission was slightly expanded with more authority and increased staffing. Now, 10 years later, the investigative workload has increased so much that half of the Commission's workload is currently on hold. So what this measure would do is it would sort of streamline the Commission operation by updating governance, quorum rules, some classifications. It would add 1 ethics investigator, and it would lower the maximum gift limit that anyone can give to a city holder, a candidate, or a member of the candidate's family. It would lower that maximum gift limit to $50. So the fiscal effects, or what this would cost, is on the order of about $250,000 really for the investigator. The changes in staffing, it's a little fuzzier whether it would increase or decrease on sort of this order of magnitude. So again, we have the signatories for and against, so no money for this measure. Supporters say in order to be effective, the Commission must have the resources to actually manage its workload. And really, you want to limit gifts from lobbyists to public officials and candidates. The opponents say, voters should not approve additional funding for the Public Ethics Commission because it's not always done its job of holding public officials accountable or of ensuring that government processes are transparent. So again, if you vote yes, you are approving the charter amendments to the Public Ethics Commission, and if you vote no, you're opposing the charter changes. I'm just going to run through a few more slides. While the League never endorses or opposes candidates, we do conduct candidate forums, and those recordings are listed off our website. I want to point that out. We do get a number of questions around the recall election, so I just wanted to go through this. Again, we have a mayoral recall on whether or not to recall Mayor Sheng Tao. So if you are voting yes, you are voting that she be removed from office now. If you are voting no, then you are voting that she be allowed to finish her term, which goes through January of 2027. So the threshold is 50%. And if the recall passes, the president of the city council takes over as temporary mayor, and we would have a special election, probably March, April. And again, that's just the mechanics if this all passes, just because we get a lot of questions around it. And if we had a special election, the new mayor's term would be to complete the current mayor's term. So it would go through January of 2027, and November 2026, we'd have another election. We also have a second recall. Alameda County voters are deciding whether or not to recall the district attorney, Pamela Price. The mechanics are a little different there. Again, 50% to recall, but if it passes, the Alameda County Board of Supervisors will approve a new district attorney who will serve out the rest of the term. If you are not aware, we have something really new this time, which is the youth vote. This is a measure that we passed in 2020 to make 16 and 17-year-olds eligible to vote, but vote only in OUSD school board elections. So any 16 or 17-year-old residing in Oakland who is previously pre-registered to vote can automatically vote in this election. And we have a Youth Decide committee that's really out there registering high schoolers as we speak. Keep in mind, ranked choice voting, that's how we vote on all our elected officials in Oakland. We have up to 5 choices. You don't have to use all 5 choices. So really vote for your favorite candidate, the one you love, and keep going till you start to hate the people, and then you can just stop. So you don't have to use all 5. You can use 1, 2, 3, 4, how many ever you want. Please don't vote for more than one person in one column, because then the computer doesn't know who you're voting for, and that invalidates the ballot for that race. You don't have to vote for all 5 again, and it does not help if you vote for the same person multiple times. The vote will only count once for that person. We went through a lot of information in a short bit of time, so please, again, our website is lwvoakland.org. So we've got lots of information. We've got more one-pagers on the local measures. We've got short videos that are under 2 minutes. And we have also resources on the state, both written and videos. And I think that is kind of it. We are thrilled to be celebrating our centennial. I promise I'm not 100 years old, but the League has been championing democracy in Oakland for that long. So we're really thrilled to do that, pointing out our website, lwvoakland.org. We also have a national resource, which is vote411.org. If you go on there and if you enter your address, it'll spit out, all the races that you're going to vote on, because ballots are just coming out. So I haven't received mine as yet. So this tells you in advance everything that you're going to be voting on. And as always, please consider becoming a member. More important than the money, it's really the validation. And we also offer a sliding scale fee if you're interested. That is pretty much it, and I will stop screen share.
Before we let you go, there was one question on the violence prevention measure for Oakland NN, and that is, what other funding goes to the police department aside from this measure? Well, I guess the one that's going to expire this year, unless this one gets.
I couldn't tell you the exact amount, but a huge part of our budget goes to the police department. I just can't tell you the exact
So it's just from
amount.
other taxes, and this is an extra measure.
And so this would be, give me 1 second, what was the amount? We said 47 million. So they estimated 47 million and 60%. So if this measure passes, the police department would get 28 million from this. I'm sorry, I do not know the budget for the police department, but they get a good chunk of our overall budget.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure.
And thanks to all of you for attending this evening. Members of the co-sponsoring organizations for this evening do the hands-on work to help keep our democracy strong. So if you would like to be involved with the men and women striving to make democracy work for all, consider joining any of the sponsoring organizations. We'll be sending out more information on the co-sponsors and on the Oakland League of Women Voters to anyone who put their email address in the chat. Thank you again, Anna, for the informative and engaging presentation. And again, thank everyone who took the time to join us this evening for your attention and your questions. Once again, October 21st is the deadline to register to vote by mail in the November 5th election, but you can register in person up to and including Election Day. So hopefully you have your voter information guides, your ballots have been mailed out already, so hopefully they'll come this week if they haven't come already. And again, remember to, 30-something%, like 30% of folks return their ballots for the primary. Like, everybody gets a ballot, fill it out, don't leave it on your dining room table, turn it in. But we really need to get out the vote. We want people to actually turn in the ballots that they receive in the mail. So do that, do your part, and encourage somebody else to do it as well. You can vote in person early in some locations, so check that vote411.org website to make sure you get the information that's personal to you. And again, we thank you for your presence and participation and look forward to seeing you at future events. Remember, your vote is your voice. Good night.
Thank you so much.